All right, so this is the Poverty and Urban Stress website, and it is made up of three components. So the first part is all of the urban stress reports that you're used to looking at. And you can see we have 2007, 2012, and the new draft 2020 report. And if you click on those, you'll be taken to those. The second part is all of the applications that we have been working on. So there's 3 of them right now, and I'll be sharing those in just a second. And the last part is the what's called the open data portion. So this is where you'll be able to get the actual data that we've used to create the poverty and urban stress reports and all of the maps that we'll be showing today. So I am going to be focusing on 2 story maps. These 2 on your right hand side. Anne is going to be talking about the Neighborhood Vulnerability Index. And I'm going to start, we're going to start broad with a map that shows all of the city, and we're going to work our way through getting more granular as we go. So starting with the city, then focusing on wards, and then we're going to look at that open data part where you really get to dig into the actual data. So to open the first story map, I'm just going to click on Open Application, and it will open that application right in the browser. And this is a story map that is based on a scrolling experience. So what I'm doing is just using the little wheel on my mouse to scroll down, and as I do that, information starts to appear. And you have this introduction, what is the story map about? And you immediately get the experience is a guided experience. So there's going to be a lot of text explaining what it is that you're looking at, telling you how to use this, scroll down to follow the narrative. So this story map is really ideal for people who are kind of being introduced to the topic of poverty and urban stress, and they want someone to kind of tell them what the data is showing. And so as I'm scrolling down, the first thing that we get is a map. And I keep scrolling, and I get more information that comes up as I'm scrolling. And here we have a chart showing how the population has changed. So first, we're just kind of setting the stage of what are the demographics of Tucson like. And as I continue to scroll, I'm going to get a legend that helps me understand this map. And the legend is really important because a lot of these maps might not be the kind of maps that you're used to looking at. So you really need to kind of pay attention for when that legend pops up. And here what we're seeing is that these arrows are going to represent areas where the population has changed the most. If it's a yellow arrow, it is a change greater than 1.8%. If it's a blue arrow, it's a change that is a decrease by 1% or more. And so that is what is highlighted here. And then we can click on these arrows and we find more information. So we see details that in this census block, this one is block groups, the change was 2.29% growth between 2010 and 2018. And we can see the detailed change in population. And we can see some other interesting information like the predominant population race. We also can, let me move something real quick. We also can use these plus and minus arrows over here to zoom in on the map. And here you can see information points that did not make those sort of high level, greater than or less than 1.8, but you still might be interested in. And so you can click on these, and they're kind of faded out because they're not the standout data. They're not really telling the big story, but they're still interesting. You also see these neighborhoods come up as sort of a helpful guide for people who want to know, I just want to know what's going on in my neighborhood of Sam Hughes, perhaps. So then I continue scrolling, so that was just one map, and as I scroll, you see that this toolbar up here is showing us that we've moved from growth in Tucson to poverty. And we get a sort of, a context of how to situate Tucson. We're comparing Tucson to Pima County and the rest of the state. And I continue to scroll. And now we're looking at poverty across Tucson. And again, this is a map where you want to pay attention to the legend. So the size here is showing the population for that census tract, while the color is showing the percent of population that is below the federal poverty line. And here, in this case, brighter colors indicate more, a higher percent, while the darker colors fade into the background and represent less. So any area where you see a brighter color is going to be an area where there's more poverty. And as we scroll down, we actually get just those census tracts with the highest rate of poverty have been highlighted for us. So areas that are greater than around 40% or around 35. And so this is an example of how it's guided. It's showing you, it's trying to tell a story of what the data is saying. And yeah, so the rest of the story map is, you should probably just explore it yourself, but I can continue to kind of highlight some pieces. Median household income, as you scroll down, you see how these pieces of data are building on each other. So you get a sense of where income is lowest and eventually where income is highest. So you start to see patterns about, what's going on right here in Tucson and what is going on outside of Tucson. Another thing that I want to point out is that, we're scrolling this whole time, but you also have the option to flip between different sections using these tabs at the top. And I recommend going through the whole story map once using the scrolling experience before you start using these tabs, because each one of these tabs has more information within it, and it's possible that you will miss, if you just skip between the tabs, it's possible that you will miss information. For instance, under this race tab, we have all of these additional maps that break up race into, where is the largest percent of white population, where is the largest Hispanic population, and so on. So in sum, this is a really great tool for people who don't have a lot of experience with these topics, and they just kind of want to get a broad overview of how these indicators play out across the city. But if for people who want to have, they're more familiar with this stuff, they have specific questions that they want to answer, then I recommend using the indicators of poverty and urban stress by ward. And this gets a little bit more detailed. So again, I'm opening up that application. And here we have it's a completely different application design. So instead of a scrolling experience, we again have these tabs of the indicators. And as we flip through them, we get to see these different indicators and how they look differently across the city. So in addition to these tabs across the top with each type of indicator, we also have a filter that lets you filter by ward. So if I am only interested in Ward 1, I can click on that. If I want to compare Ward 1 to Ward 3, I can click on Ward 3. I can continue to add these as many as I want, or I can go back to all wards just to see how they all stack up. Like the previous story map, we have the option of clicking on individual census tracts. And when you do that, you get information that pertains just to that census tract. So here it's telling you the median income for this tract, how this compares to the ward's median income, and how this compares to Pima County's median income. And this also shows a little graph showing how this particular census tract compares to Pima County. You can do this for any of these census tracts. And the colors change to sort of indicate, are we looking at more dollars or fewer dollars? You also, so as we're going through, we have poverty. It's very similar to the income. As you click on this, you're seeing of this certain population in the census tract, 37% have incomes below poverty, which is 9% higher than the ward's poverty rate, and 19% higher than Pima County's poverty rate. And we can also filter these to see how the different wards compare. And as we do that, we get this chart that helps you get an at-a-glance comparison for these. I'm going to continue to go through these different tabs because something else that I want to point out. Let me refresh this real quick. There we go. Okay, so I want to continue to go through each of these tabs because what you'll see is when you get to certain tabs, we see more tabs that break down this indicator into more nuanced categories. So here we have the darker colors represent census tracts where there is a predominant population of people who have whose highest educational attainment is less than high school. But as we flip through these tabs down here at the bottom, we see we go from less than high school to some college and then bachelor's degree or higher. And again, we can switch through these wards to see where, how do the different wards compare on, achievement of bachelor degrees. Same for race. So we see we start with a predominant race map, and this is showing out of all of the wards, or out of all of the races that we consider, which you see down here in this legend, what is the predominant race of each census tract? And you get a sense that there's a pretty strong divide between the West and the East for Hispanic on one side and white on the other. And you can also, again, click on these and it will tell you the predominant race here is non-Hispanic white, and it'll tell you what percentage of the population is made up of that race type. And as we flip through these, it shows you the density or the concentration of each of these different racial categories. Finally, we have crime, and this is specifically for 2019, and this is using the city's crime incident data. And here we've broken it down into Part 1, property crimes, Part 1, violent crimes, and Part 2, crimes. And you can click on these, learn some information about, what different crimes went into that census tract in 2019. You can filter them. You also have the option in all of these maps right down here to learn about the data that went into making these maps. So if you're curious about what data was used, you see that we have the American Community Survey data of 5-year estimates, and that is where this went. All right, the last thing I want to show is the open data component. And here we have, right now it's called Tucson, it's Tucson demographic data. And right now it says Tucson neighborhoods and wards. But we only have, for the time being, we only have neighborhood data, but we plan to add ward data and just census tract data. But so what this is you can see the different categories that we've used in the maps. And if you say, I want to see neighborhood race data, then you can click on this and it will open. It will take you to the data that was used for the race maps, and it is divided by neighborhood. And so right now we have an overview. It's showing you what different columns you'll see in the data. It's showing you a map of what that data looks like, which is our neighborhoods data layer. And when you click on data, you actually get basically a spreadsheet of the data that is used, and it's divided by neighborhood. And as you scroll across, you can see, well, first let's create a filter. So let's say we only want to look at Barrio Santa Rosa. Then we can just look at this one neighborhood if we want, and we can scroll across and see all of the different indicators for that are within the race demographic data. 2019 minority population, any of these different things that are in this data. We can clear this filter, and we're back to all of these. You also have the option of downloading this data, so you can download it as a spreadsheet, as a KML that you can add to Google Earth, as a shapefile for people who do their own GIS. You can get an API that you can program against if you know how to do that. You also have the option of creating your own web map. So we've created all of these maps of stuff that we find interesting, but if you click on this Create Web Map option, it will actually take you to a copy of that data, and you can set, you can symbolize it based on whatever feature that you're interested in. And so we have this for all of these different categories right now, whether you're interested in income or employment, but it's all focused on neighborhood, but we will be adding more data to this as this continues.